Hey guys, in this video I want to show you how I took a picture that looks like this to this in Lightroom. Let's get started. So this was kind of these were like all trial shots after starting here, and then you can see that I changed this mint leaf, so it's making like an immediate big change in the picture, as well as I also added this cloth over here, but I was not like taking the cloth, so I removed that, and here's kind of where we ended up. So this is like the picture that I want to actually go with. The mint leaf is looking pretty fresh over here, it's all good, and this is at f2.2, my favorite aperture to shoot with, so it works for me. Now what I first do is I go to my detail section and I sharpen it a bit. Always apply like 70 to 85 depending on the picture. I'm going for the all 85 over here. Outside of that, I go to lens correction, remove chromatic aberration, enable profile corrections. Now this makes the biggest change in the picture because it kind of gets rid of something called vignetting in the picture. Vignetting is just the darkening of your corners in your pictures. That happens due to big aperture lenses like Canon 50mm 1.8, 1.4. It doesn't happen too much with 1.2. It's because it's like a much more expensive lens, so they fix that. But in case you do use a lens like this, you can always apply enable profile corrections to get rid of that vignetting. So pretty big change, and I like it since it's like a high key shot. I mean, a shot with a lot of highlights, like bright bits. I don't want that dark corners. It looks a bit weird. So it looks pretty good like when I after I get rid of that. So I'm gonna keep that. Usually if I'm doing a darker picture, I do keep that vignetting in. So if I reduce this fully, the vignetting comes back, so it doesn't apply. But in this case, I'm leaving it as it is. Now, yep. Now it's time for like the basic corrections. Now I did white balance this shot when I shot it, but I actually want to make it a little bit warmer in order to like make it more inviting. So this is chia pudding that he did, and right now it's just the actual color of it was white, but this looks a bit murky. It's not bright enough. It was brighter in real life, so we are going to do that. But before that, I want to apply some temperature corrections. So I'm gonna try see what Lightroom thinks. So when I do auto, it automatically corrects the white balance for me. It doesn't always work, but in this case it's pretty good. But I'm not gonna go with the exact settings that it gave me. So this is just for me to like gauge what Lightroom thinks, and then I make my own decision. So that's my whole correction process. Instead of making it like 5700, I'm gonna go with 55. That looks good enough to me, and I'm gonna leave the tint as it is. So tint just makes it greener or more magenta. In this case it does look balanced, so I'm not gonna touch that. Now the next change that I make, the big one really, it is the whites. So always like push it to the max, then I reduce this. Now that red bits that you saw, that came because I have this on. It shows highlight clipping. Clipping is nothing but like you losing data. So when things start clipping, it means there are no color variations there. There are no details there. It's just like a white pixel. That's what Lightroom is trying to tell me. It is kind of warning me that I'm losing all this data, and so it's up to me to decide whether I'm keeping it or not. So right now it does look like a bit too much. If you find it distracting, you can always turn it off, but you won't get that warning. And it looks very overexposed, so I am going to reduce this. So let's reduce it a bit. So it's okay for me to lose a little bit of data here and there, so that's perfectly fine with me. So I'm gonna increase the whites. 55 looks pretty good. Now this kind of makes the biggest change for me, and that's the biggest change I also want to make. So I'm gonna leave it as it is and increase the shadows a bit. What increasing shadows does is it increases the details in the shadow areas alone, like how the whites actually affect only the bright bits of the image, but when I go too far it starts affecting the shadow area as well. but it does mostly stick to the brighter parts. The shadows, it does the opposite. It affects only the shadow areas of the image and doesn't touch the light parts. um, and I also want to increase the texture a bit to add some detail to the mint leaf, or leaves I should say, because there's not much other details going on, because this chia seeds, they're not like super sharp, they don't have like extreme texture to show off. So the only real texture is coming from the mint leaf, so I want to emphasize on that. So I'm going to increase the texture. What that does is it sharpens the picture, but it also adds a little bit of contrast to the picture. Yep, it's good. And I also want to like touch the green set just a bit more. I want it to pop more. It looks a little too dark for me, so I'm gonna make the green greener. Yeah, so what this does is it lets me control the specific color that I want to control in an image. So for example, if I want to just touch the blues, so we have a blue over here, so you can see what changes it makes. So if I turn down the saturation, it gets rid of the blues totally, but doesn't affect any other color. So the yellows are perfectly fine, the greens are perfectly fine, the reds are also perfectly fine. There's a little bit of red over there. We're going to crop that later, but for now, no, I actually want to have the blues. It does give a good pop of color, but it does look, it's kind of a little bit too distracting. So I'm going to change the hue of the blue. So instead of like blue, it's super contrasty in the picture, so I'm going to make it like kind of aqua kind of thing, or turquoise as they say. So that's the color I want to go with. Looks good. No, it's a bit too much, so changes based on what the image that you're working with. Looks a bit odd, but it might be because I'm used to seeing the blue as the actual color and I don't have a color, this colored cup, so it looks a bit weird to me. Let me know what you think. I think I'm gonna stick to the blues, maybe just a touch of this color, but mostly blue. I'd love to know from you in the comments. Now moving on, let's go to the greens, which is what we came here for. And the hue, what the hue does is kind of what we saw it doing in the blue section. It just changes the color alone of the color, if that makes sense. It doesn't affect the intensity of the color, it doesn't affect the brightness of the color, it just affects the tone itself. So we can make it like more yellow, more, I don't know what this is, like more cyan I guess, or bluish. Let's make it a bit yellow, not too much. Looks a little bit more lively that way. Yeah. Now saturation, that affects the intensity of the color. So if I want to increase this, so it makes it like super green or like gray. If I take all the color out of it, I'm gonna increase it just a bit. So 20. I'm using my keyboard to control this just to have round numbers. I like saying round numbers, so I'm doing it that way. But you can of course click, or if you have a touch screen, if you're doing it on your phone, you can always like do the touch screen thing where you affect the sliders like that. But I want numbers that are divisible by 5. So luminance, what that does is it affects the brightness of this specific color. So that's what I'm doing over here. Yep, much better already. Also I want to decrease the blacks just a little bit. Of course what blacks does is it kind of works like shadows, but it affects the much darker parts and it makes a bigger change. So I'm gonna decrease it just a bit, just for a little bit of contrast. If you notice, we haven't touched the exposure or the contrast because I don't want to mess with that. I'm changing all these specific things already, so I don't want to change the overall stuff over there. Now for the last part, I want to crop this picture, so it's gonna go on Instagram. So 4:5, that is the holy ratio of Instagram, so I'm gonna keep that. Yep, that's good. Now if you're working with a picture with like more colors and you want to like boost the colors overall, you can always use this vibrance tab to increase the overall colors in the picture or decrease it. It's pretty good. And I think that's about it. I think we're done with this. So now to export this, so in Lightroom, if you're working on your computer, you can always press Ctrl Shift and E to go to export or file export, I think. I don't use that, so I'm not sure. Yeah, it's file and export. So Control Shift T. The shortcut is like much easier to use, so I'm using that. Export location, I'm choosing it later. File naming, I'm not changing the name. It's not a video, so no video. So file settings, we want to press JPEG, which is like the most widely used image format. Most cameras shoot in JPEG. I did shoot in RAW to give me more editing capabilities, but I do want to export it to JPEG so that it fits Instagram. So JPEG, quality no reduction, and color space sRGB. So when you're uploading pictures to the internet or to be viewed on a screen, sRGB works perfectly. And no output sharpening, metadata. I don't want to remove anything. Instagram does it for me anyway, so I'm keeping it as it is. And if you want to add a watermark, you can always add a watermark. You can upload your logo inside. You can just put text. So that's a whole other thing. I don't want to do anything. Post processing is like after the image gets exported, what do you want it to do? That's what. So most people select do nothing, but I want to show it in Explorer just to make it easier for me to open. Export, desktop. So to Aravind, so that's my brother. This is who I'm editing the picture for him to post on his page. That was a movie I was watching, pretty good. Yeah, so I've selected this folder and it's exporting on top, if you can see here. So it loads. After it gets loaded, you can see the picture on your computer. Yep. So also one more thing, so this is how it looks after I edited it. So here's where we started. So editing does make like a pretty big difference to your pictures. Of course, it depends on what you're doing with your editing. I'll of course be posting the raw and the final picture on my Instagram. So if the video is up, the image is also probably up, so you can go compare it next to next if you feel better that way. But that's about it, guys. So let me know what you thought of this video, and thank you so much for watching. Bye.